The voice on the radio knew his name. It spoke through the static with a warmth that made the tower feel colder.
Cold Bay Tower, Trans-Pacific, the 27th of December, layering an emergency. Engine fire. Request immediate landing clearance.
Charles Vane stared at the secondary radar. No contact, nothing but empty airspace. The voice was a phantom.
Trans-Pacific 27, Cold Bay Tower. You are cleared to land. Proceed at your own risk.
The radar screen flickered violently. Then the tower lights died, plunging them into total darkness. 3 days later, a single entry appeared on the controller roster. Charles Vane answered. Disappeared, red ink. 4 months later, Brian Maddox stepped off a supply plane onto the gravel runway of Cold Bay, Alaska. The wind cut through his jacket like it was looking for bones. He looked up at the glass tower on the hill. Its rotating beacon was still, a dead eye against the gray sky. The isolation settled in his chest. Inside, the air was thick with stale cigarette smoke and a deeper chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Old equipment hummed in the shadows.
You are the new one. Sit down. I have a list of rules you'll need to survive here.
Rules? For what? The coffee machine.
This screen. The only thing you trust. If it's not on here, it's not real.
Brian ran his fingers over the flight strip board. Its edges curled and brittle as a dead leaf.
That's the coffee maker. If it breaks, you are on your own. Supplies are in the locker.
Red ink? Someone die?
Old history. Don't worry about it. Let's get you set up at the console.
The headset crackled with a routine call from Anchorage. Brian's response was smooth, professional, nothing like the knot tightening in his gut. Frank leaned against the wall, lit a cigarette, and finally spoke.
You'll do fine if you follow the rules.
The supply plane's engine faded into the gray. Frank was gone. Brian stood alone in the humming tower, the list of rules still unspoken, but already pressing against the silence like a held breath. Brian opened the drawer beneath the flight strip board. Inside, a worn logbook with no dates, only rules. 1. Never clear an aircraft not on secondary radar. No matter what you hear, the voice will beg, you will want to. Don't. 2. The fog at 3 a.m. is not just fog. Lock the doors, stay inside. If you see shapes, don't look. 3. If the runway lights cycle on by themselves, do not turn them off. They're not for you. 4. Trans-Pacific 27 died in 1971. If you hear it, let it talk. Never respond. The last one who answered is gone. 5. Never look directly at the rotating beacon when it's red. It sees you. Just keep your eyes on your work.
Old-timer paranoia. Just a way to make the isolation feel like a test.
He closed the logbook and hung the headset on its hook. The tower settled into its nightly hum, as if listening. Outside, a low bank of fog began to gather on the runway. The clock on the console blinked 2:47 a.m. Brian turned to the radar scope, its green sweep painting the emptiness. The notepad sat beside him, the rules waiting like a loaded gun. The digital clock on the wall hit 2:58 a.m. Outside, the fog did not roll in. It rose like a curtain lifted by something underneath.
Rule 2. The fog. Lock the doors. Stay inside.
He lunged for the door and threw the deadbolt. The lock clicked into place a second before the first sound, a scratching, like fingernails dragged slowly across the glass, came from the window behind him.
Don't look. Don't look. The rule says, don't look.
In the corner of his vision, a shape pressed against the fog, tall, human, but bonelessly wrong. Brian gripped the console and recited the 5 rules under his breath, a mantra against the dark. The scratching built to a frantic scrape, then stopped. Silence flooded the tower like water. At 3:13 a.m., the fog sank back into the tundra as if yanked by a cord. The runway was clear. The tower was silent. On his notepad, beneath the 5 rules, Brian wrote in a shaky hand, Rule 2, real. 3 weeks later, on a moonless night, the runway lights snapped on. Every edge and centerline blazed white against the black tundra.
There was no traffic. The radar was empty. My hand moved to the light switch on autopilot.
Then he remembered Rule 3. His fingers curled back as if burned, retreating from the switch.
They're not for you. That's what the rule said.
He pressed the headset tighter and strained to listen. The frequency crackled with open air, and then a scream, distant, human, full of a terror that had no name. The scream cut off as abruptly as it began. The runway lights died one by one, left to right, like candles snuffed by an invisible hand. Brian grabbed the console and tried to raise anchorage. The radio returned only the whisper of an empty sea.
Something happened here. Something that left a record.
He pulled out the tower's dusty maintenance logs, their pages brittle with age. The year 1971 was circled in red ink on the first page. If the rules had a source, he would find it. The past was no longer a warning, it was a map. He spent hours hunched over maintenance logs, tracing entries back to 1971. The words stopped making sense after the crash. Outside, the rotating beacon ground to a halt on its red filter. The room drowned in sluggish arterial pulses.
Rule 5. Look away. But my head turned before thought could catch it.
A cold pressure flooded his skull, like ice water poured into the ear. Not a sound, a presence. Prying, he squeezed his eyes shut and wrenched his head down, the whispers coiling in like tones that fed on memory. A sharp lance of pain stabbed through his eardrum. Warmth trickled down his neck. The rule had teeth.
Don't open your eyes. Don't listen. Recite the rules.
The red light bled from behind his eyelids, replaced by the cold gray of afternoon. The beacon cycled back to white. He touched his ear. His fingertips came away red. The whispers had died, but a faint echo pressed against his skull like a bruise. He bandaged the ear with gauze from the first aid kit, but the ache lingered deep as if something had rooted there. A week after the beacon drilled its red whisper into his skull, a raw voice tore through the frequency. Cold Bay Tower, we are declaring an emergency. Engine failure, smoke in the cockpit. Request immediate vectors for landing.
The secondary radar was a clean black void. No aircraft existed out there.
Please, we are losing altitude. I have people on board. Just give me a heading. Damn it. His hand went to the transmit button. The black ink of Rule 1 felt like ice down his spine. He pulled back. The frequency carried a choked breath, then a fading why, then static. Dead air. The tower's silence flooded back, heavier than before.
Was that real? Did I just let people die because of a superstition?
He logged, unknown aircraft distress call. No radar contact. Did not respond. He hesitated, then added, unconfirmed ghost. He couldn't sleep. By 4 a.m., he was tearing into the tower's historical files, searching for Trans-Pacific 27. In a moldering box labeled Historical Incidents, he found a newspaper whose ink bled into the page like a bruise. Trans-Pacific 27 vanishes over Aleutian Street, Orm. All 15 aboard presumed dead. The report said the plane dropped off radar at 3:13 a.m. No wreckage was ever found, only a photograph of twisted metal and fog on the volcanic slope. Beneath the clipping, a brittle photograph showed 15 men in pilot uniforms arranged in 2 grim rows.
One face pulled at his memory, a feature he'd glimpsed in a mirror once, then forgotten.
He pinned the photograph to the corkboard beside his console, its edges curling under the weight of the green radar light. He opened the maintenance logs again and lined up the dates. The rules began the same year, the same month, the same night.
So it's not just a legend.
A cold draft slithered through the tower. The photo flapped against the board as if the men had exhaled. He taped the photograph down firmly, but the chill that settled in his bones had nothing to do with the failing heat. The digital clock on the wall hit 2:17 a.m., Then the frequency crackled to life with a voice that didn't belong to any living pilot.
Cold Bay Tower, Trans-Pacific, the 27th of December, layering an emergency. Engine fire. We're losing altitude.
Brian's hand froze over the keyboard. The secondary radar showed nothing but the clean green grid of empty air.
Brian, I know you are there. I can see your tower light burning.
He knew my name. He knew my name.
He spun toward the window. Outside, only the black mass of the tundra and the red blink of the beacon waited.
I am not asking you to clear me. Just listen. That's all I need.
He dropped the mic and stumbled back. The voice didn't come from the speaker. It vibrated in the glass in his teeth.
You did well with the fog, with the lights, even the beacon, but I know you are tired of being alone.
He pressed his palms to his ears, but the voice only grew warmer inside his skull.
I have 12 people on board, Brian. 2 are children. The fire is spreading. Please.
Rule 4. Let it talk. Never respond. But the words were razors in his throat.
He shook his head, eyes watering, the silence his only shield against a voice that felt like a father's.
You are doing well. The last controller didn't make it this long. He broke when I mentioned his daughter.
The last one. What happened to him?
Brian's breath caught. The voice on the radio was no longer pleading. It was sorrowful, ancient, as if it had spoken these words 100 times.
He answered. He wanted to help. Now he flies with us. You are talking to him now. This is his voice, his penance.
Brian gagged. The image of a trapped controller speaking through dead radio waves flooding his mind.
Remember, Brian, we're always listening. One day you'll join us. Until then, follow the rules.
The transmission died. The tower hummed with the after-echo of a voice that wasn't human, and the clock on the wall read 3:13 a.m. Sleep became a stranger. He woke on the console cot, certain a cold hand had been on his shoulder. Nothing but the hum of machines. In his coffee, a dead pilot's face stared back, then dissolved into steam. He cleared real planes by reflex, his voice flat. Food lost all taste.
Rule 1. Rule 2. Rule 3. Rule 4. Rule 5.
He saw it, taxiing without sound, and turned away before the red beacon could catch him. The transfer request dissolved into static and a distant, knowing chuckle. He smashed the handset against the console, then stared at the pieces, breathing hard. The radar scope dimmed. His reflection wore a pilot's cap and a smile that wasn't his. He curled into the corner, whispering, "It's not real," until the words lost all meaning. The calendar became his only anchor. He marked each day with a trembling X. At 2:45 a.m., the fog surged, the runway lights blazed, and the rotating beacon locked on red, all in the same breath.
No.
Final warning, Brian.
He crouched behind the console, jamming the headphones over his ears, but the voice seeped through. A chorus now, 15 pilots pleading as one.
Join us.
Never clear an aircraft not on secondary radar. The fog at 3 a.m. is not just fog. If the runway lights cycle on.
The tower shuddered. A pane of glass spiderwebbed, with a sharp crack, but no wind followed, only the voice growing louder. He did not look at the beacon. He did not touch the light switch. He did not answer. At 3:13 a.m., the fog dropped, the lights died, and the beacon cycled to white. Silence crashed down like a hammer. Brian collapsed, sobbing onto the console. The rules had held, but he knew then, if he stayed, he would break. His duffel sat packed by the door. Brian dialed Anchorage for a medical evacuation. The line went dead mid-sentence.
Satellite phone, 0 bars. Radio, nothing but that voice. I am sealed in.
The nearest village was 15 miles away. He pulled on his jacket and threw open the tower door. Daylight had vanished. A wall of fog stood outside, thick as felt. Rule 2 screamed in his memory, but his feet carried him forward. He walked for what felt like an hour. The fog never thinned, never shifted, only pressed closer, damp and heavy with a smell like old rain.
I should have hit the gravel road by now. Where is the road?
He stumbled over a rock and caught himself on a cold metal post. The red beacon blinked ahead, 50 feet from the tower's door. He re-entered the tower, mud-caked and hollow. The door slammed shut behind him with a soft final click.
It won't let me leave. Not until the year's up. But why? Why me?
He pulled the controller roster off the wall. If he couldn't run, he would understand. He spread the roster sheets across the console. The names blurred in the green light, then sharpened into a pattern. 15 names, cycling every 4 years since 1971.
Rogers, Vance, Nesbitt. They're all here. They match the crew photo.
His finger slid down the column, past familiar names, until it stopped on his own. Brian Maddox, scrawled in 2019 and 2013 and 2007 and 2001.
I've been here before. I don't remember any of it.
He tore open the tower's personal log locker. Empty. No diaries, no keepsakes, only a blank FAA manual and a faded photograph of a man who looked like his grandfather.
Why do I have no memories before flight school? Just blank.
He sat in the silent tower, the truth settling like cold water in his veins. He was not a new hire. He was a return.
I am one of them. I died on Trans-Pacific 27.
The name on the roster blurred as if the ink itself was weeping.
I am a pilot.
The next quiet night, Brian keyed the mic. The click of the transmitter was a gunshot in the silence.
What are you? Why are we trapped like this?
We're the unlucky ones, the pilots who never landed. When we die, we wake up here. We serve.
The voice paused, then continued, a tired teacher explaining a lesson too many times.
If we answer the call, we fly forever as crew. If we don't, we finish our year, get released, only to be reborn and come back with no memory.
Brian's throat tightened. He had done this before, countless times, and remembered nothing.
So I've been here before, and I never answer.
You always try to leave. You never answer. But the last controller, he answered. Now he flies with us.
He slumped against the console. The damned choice. Silence and rebirth, or speech and eternal flight.
You have 47 days left in this rotation. Choose wisely, Brian. We'll be listening.
That night, sleep took him not as rest, but as a trapdoor. He fell into a 1970s cockpit, smoke hazing the instrument panel. The other pilots were there, the faces from the faded photograph, warm and alive. One turned with a knowing smile.
Don't worry, Brian. We'll all be together again.
The plane shuddered, altimeter spinning down. Brian felt the yoke go slack in hands he suddenly knew were not his own.
I know this cockpit. I know this death.
He woke gasping, the red pulse of the beacon painting the tower walls. But where dread should have been, a strange warmth lingered for his crew. His FAA badge lay on the console. The photo was no longer his. It had morphed into the pilot from the dream, a face he now knew. Outside, the ghostly rumble of prop engines idled, muffled by fog. A landing light blinked in the mist, calling,
Rule 4. Let it talk. Never respond.
He tore himself from the window and recited the rule until the engine sound faded into the Aleutian night. The calendar page turned. The final X stared back at Brian like a finish line. He zipped his duffel and reached for the door handle. It was as cold and immovable as stone.
Don't leave us, Brian.
Outside, the rotating beacon locked on red, drowning the room in sluggish arterial pulses.
Never clear an aircraft not on secondary radar. The fog at 3 a.m. is not just fog. If the runway lights cycle on.
A real engine rumbled, mechanical, distant. The curse that held the door shivered, then receded. The door creaked open. Brian stumbled onto the gravel, gulping air that tasted like ice and freedom. Kenneth Vance stepped off the supply plane, duffel in hand, looking up at the glass tower like a man walking into a photograph.
I'm sorry.
Kenneth didn't respond, just glanced at the roster on the wall as he entered. Brian's packed duffel waited by the door. Brian recited the 5 rules, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had spoken them to himself 1,000 times. Kenneth jotted notes, brow furrowed.
Is this some kind of hazing ritual?
You'll understand. Just follow them.
He walked Kenneth through the equipment, the radar scope, the board, the coffee maker, but carefully avoided the roster pinned to the wall. As Kenneth settled into the chair, Brian slipped the old FAA transfer log from the shelf. The binding cracked like a dry rib. He flipped to the Cold Bay assignment page. Kenneth Vance was listed for 2024, 2028, 2032, the dates looping like an incantation. His hand trembled. He closed the log and slid it back onto the shelf before Kenneth could turn around.
Good luck, Kenneth.
Then he walked out without looking back. The door clicked shut, sealing Kenneth inside with the quiet hum of the tower. The roster on the wall waited, patient as a grave. The ink was already dry. Brian climbed into the supply plane and took the window seat. As the engine coughed to life, the tower's beacon flickered red one last time. The plane lifted off, shrinking the tower to a splinter of glass on a gray hill. He closed his eyes and let out a breath that carried a year of dread. For a moment, the hum of the engines was only engines. A flash of motion outside snapped his eyes open. Off the wing, a ghostly prop plane kept perfect pace. Faded letters on its fuselage read Trans-Pacific 27. The cockpit windows were dark voids.
Goodbye, Brian. We'll fly with you, always.
The voice didn't come from the radio. It seeped from the air itself. A familiar warmth he now recognized as longing. He pressed his palm to the cold window. The ghost plane held formation, its shadow falling over the wing like a second skin. There was no escape. The curse hadn't ended. It had just taken flight. He was marked a permanent passenger on a flight that never landed. In a lower 48 apartment that smelled of stale air, Brian lay on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. He turned on a cheap AM radio for company. White noise breathed into a murmur, a pilot's greeting from 1971.
Still with me.
Days later, in a grocery store aisle, a stranger turned toward him and for one heartbeat wore a pilot's face. That night, he opened the FAA staffing portal. His name sat on the Cold Bay list for 2028, as inevitable as a tide table. He slammed the laptop shut, but the after-image burned on his retina like the red beacon. He took a quiet tower job in Nevada, far from any ocean, but the static followed him into the headphones every night. Sleep brought the cockpit again. The smoke, the spinning altimeter, the crew who smiled and called him brother.
In a few years, I'll step off that supply plane again, and I won't remember any of this.
He didn't scream. He just marked another day on the calendar, the X already trembling. A year later, Brian scanned the FAA staffing page. Kenneth Vance had finished his rotation without incident and rotated out. A new controller named Michael took his place. Another name from the crew photograph. Another loop in the spiral.
My name is on the list for 2028. 4 years until my turn again.
He unfolded the worn photo of the 15 pilots. One face now mirrored his own exhausted stare.
Maybe I'll answer next time.
He shook his head and tucked the photo away, but the red beacon still pulsed behind his eyelids. Outside his window, the radio static murmured a familiar warmth. He pulled up the Cold Bay roster again. Michael was scheduled through 2036, the dates stretching like a sentence. He closed the laptop and drove to the Nevada Tower for another midnight shift. The waiting had become a kind of flight, endless, silent, and never reaching the ground. Inside the Cold Bay Tower, the new controller sat alone. The radar screen painted an empty green grid. He sipped his coffee, unaware of the rules or the roster.
Cold Bay Tower, Trans-Pacific, the 27th of December, layering an emergency, engine fire. Do you read?
The controller froze. His coffee mug clattered on the console. The secondary radar showed nothing. No aircraft, no transponder, just the clean void of empty airspace.
I have 12 souls on board. We're losing altitude. Please respond.
His hand moved toward the mic without thought, the instinct of a lifetime. His fingers hovered, trembling, a hair's breadth from the red transmit button.
You can see my lights, can't you? Just say the words.
The controller's breath fogged the glass of the scope. He saw nothing, but the voice seeped into the tower like smoke, warm and familiar. His finger twitched above the button. The tower held its breath. Then the screen faded to black. The transmission dissolved into a crackle of static. Then silence. The red beacon continued its endless rotation, painting the empty chair, the silent console, the waiting roster, and the frequency that never sleeps.